Today we're kind of changing channels a bit, and we're talking with a surgeon, Dr. Greg Veman. Dr. Veman, you have just such an interesting background. I want to touch on a couple of things that I missed here. Of course, Seacoast Skin Surgery in Wilmington is where you are now. You are married. Your wife is Ruth. You have Brandon and Cameron and daughter Hannah, border collie named Pepper. You have authored a number of scientific journals that deal with specifically skin cancer and various other things that that's important to your profession. But some publications that folks may be a little bit surprised at, and one of them that when I first met you, I was kind of introduced, and it's just intrigued me, was one called the God Diagnosis. And it was something that I think the intriguing part was that a scientist would take on something that a lot of people are very close to, and it's called the Holy Bible, and it's the Scripture. But the interesting part when folks look at this book, and I encourage anybody to pick it up, not an expensive book, and it's a book that apparently you wrote it from the heart because it's easy to read. It's called The God Diagnosis, and it's by Dr. Greg Veman. But it challenges, and it challenged you to try to disprove the Bible itself, but something happened in that. Tell us what happened.
Well, I set out to prove that the Bible was false and that Christians were hypocrites because our neighbors weren't treating us right who were Christians, and I was upset. And I knew nothing really about Christianity at all. So I started in the New Testament knowing that I would not believe the Adam and Eve thing from the Old Testament. So I started in the New, and it just got my attention very quickly that Jesus was claiming to be God in the flesh, the God-man on earth, coming as, kind of a savior or rescuer for us from sin and death. And it got my attention because at that stage of my life, I was searching for answers for that. What happens to me when I die? I've got these beautiful kids and wife. What happens to our relationships? Evolution, which I was taught as a so-called scientist, says, well, they just cease to exist. Too bad, so sad. Why do people die at all? If we're so highly evolved and things are so scientifically great and evolving, why is there so much pain and suffering? And, Jesus was coming with the answers. I found answers in what he was saying and what he was claiming to do that made sense. He was saying, well, you're not supposed to die. It wasn't supposed to be that way. Sin entered the world. I've come to conquer death. You can escape someday, and I will make it right. And I knew that I had sinned, and that I had many problems in my life and needed forgiveness, so he was offering that. So that really intrigued me. The trouble was, could I believe it? This is something that happened 2,000 years ago. It was in a religious book that I knew nothing about. But I didn't know any of that. It was always about church. When people tried to talk to me about Christianity, come to church, get me in that building, listen to the man speak, and then go home and that kind of thing, versus, hey, there's a God who knows you, created you, and he came to this earth 2,000 years ago, and you need to know him. I never heard that, but I heard it in the scriptures when I was reading it, so I quickly forgot about my neighbors and said, I need to find out, did this really happen? If it really happened, if it's really true, if I can know that, then I wanted to know. And that's when I started my investigation.
So you looked at it from the sense of what you would do as a scientist to determine the validity of, for example, some kind of cancer, or you looked at it specifically step by step. When you started that process, what was the pushback that you felt within yourself? Did you feel a sense of attraction to what you were doing? Did you continue to feel that there was something wrong? Because one of the things that you spoke about is the Lucy link, this idea of evolution being from a puddle of poo to the zoo, that kind of mentality, in which I found it kind of intriguing. But it's really that process that seems to fit the scientific model. So now you're looking at something that doesn't fit the scientific model. How did you continue? What attracted you to continue to do that when all of a sudden this first opening is like, nothing works?
Well, it was kind of a dichotomy. In one sense, I wanted it to be true, because what other answer is there? Who else in history has ever come and said, okay, here's what's wrong, and I've got the fix for death, for pain, for suffering, for sin, for problems in my heart that I knew I needed to fix. But at the same time, you're right, it's completely so-called unscientific. So as I was investigating, I first looked for historical evidence for what happened. What's the evidence that this actually happened, even outside of the Bible? What's the evidence for the resurrection? That was really the key for me. If I can prove the resurrection historically or somehow from looking at the evidence that we have, then I can maybe begin to believe it. And what I found is that the deeper I dug, the more I researched, the evidence, historical evidence, solid historical evidence, was overwhelming for the resurrection of Christ and who he said he was, and that the Bible was actually a very accurate document. But then at the same time, there's this, you're right, the old scientific mind saying, wait a minute, this is the supernatural, people don't rise from the dead, people, this kind of stuff doesn't happen. So it was kind of like I wanted it to be true, and then there's another part of me that's saying, but it can't be true.
But now, you didn't come from a traditional, what we would call a church-going family, according to what I've read. You came from a family where good folks. You had a very wonderful career and a very wonderful life, but they didn't necessarily take you to church every Sunday either, did they?
No, I grew up going to church maybe once or twice in my entire life. So I knew nothing. I had a clean slate, not a religious background.
So you started from a clean piece of paper and started putting this together. What continued to intrigue you? What continued to pull you into that book that said there's something else here that's pulling at me? I know you talked a bit about the DNA, and one of the things I found interesting about the DNA piece is that, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase some of your comments here, but it was more about that there's more to DNA than just a marker, a biological statement. There's something more to that.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that. I found that very intriguing.
Well, even back in cellular molecular biology in college, when you begin to study the DNA and look at the intricacies of the human, just one cell, and how that DNA, which is the code system, works to produce the proteins and everything, the thing that struck me was it was so complex it seems like there's no way it could have evolved. In fact, the different parts that make up the DNA are interdependent, so they can't evolve independently. And furthermore, there's information in the DNA, about 3 billion bits of information, and we know that information doesn't evolve. If information has to be put into a system, and the DNA is a huge information storage bank. I think they say it's like several hundred encyclopedias of information. So I knew there had to be something or someone, but then you have your professors and everyone say, oh no, it just happened. And so I had questions. And I knew that scientifically it didn't seem logical that we just came from, like you said, the goo to the zoo to you, a big bang by random chance. It just didn't seem likely. So then when I saw that there was evidence that maybe not only was there a God, but he had revealed himself, and revealed himself in a way that I could look back on from the year 2000, well, it was 2003 at the time, and look at the evidence for, hey, is this true? Is this document reliable? And I found that it was, and there was actually a lot of evidence from outside the Bible corroborating all this. I was intrigued.
So I think the interesting part also in one of your comments that intrigued me a bit as I read through some of this is that you looked at it in the sense that humankind has not evolved, but we tend to devolve in our process. Talk to that comment a bit.
Well, if you just look at history, I mean, in 1950 in the schools, the biggest problem was, chewing gum and smoking in the bathroom. And by the time I was in high school and my kids were in high school, it was murder and mass murder and rape and all kinds of things. I could clearly see, even in the 30 years that I had lived at the time, that we were getting worse and worse. And so it didn't seem that we were so highly evolved, and we've got death and disease, and why if we were so highly evolved, why would all of our relationships that we create, the love that we have for each other, just be random chance that ceases to exist? That didn't make sense. And the other thing that didn't make sense is how can, if we're just strictly physical, which is evolution would teach you, how can you have feelings and emotions like love? How can you have a conscience that knows that you do something wrong? How can molecules know the second that you steal something, that you did something wrong, and tell you inside, hey, that wasn't right? How could they know that? So there were a lot of unanswered questions. It's just that you kind of bury them by the scientists who say, oh, well, there is no answer. We don't understand that, but it certainly can't be the God thing.
Mm-hmm. So these kind of subjective things that you started approaching came to you more in the sense, the more you researched it, as a kind of a scientific reality for you. You were able to move from the subjective to the reality. Where does faith fit in that process? Of course, one of the things I read, it was the comment that faith is this kind of belief in something that is not scientific, but you affirm yourself in that, which becomes Christianity. We might have to pick this up on after the break, but I want to address that a bit, maybe as we come back, and talk about that piece that is not necessarily parallel, but a piece of the process when you read Scripture that is built around that one word faith that maybe we just do not have the volume of knowledge to deal with. And I think, looking from your background as a very accomplished scientist, very top of your class, done a lot of things in the scientific world, I want you to speak to that a bit, because I think it's kind of founded in what folks are as Christians and how folk view themselves. They might not understand it, but they believe in it. And we're going to take that up when we come back. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Dr. Greg Veeman. We're talking about his publications and books, The God Diagnosis, and a couple of others. We're going to bring those to your attention. Call a friend. We'll be back in a moment.
Sampson County's free community newspaper is on the stands. Read all about our community news, sports, lifestyles, weddings, education, obituaries, classifieds, and much more community information. Know what's going on in your community. Read the Sampson Weekly. Submit your ideas to the Sampson Weekly at thesampsonweekly.com. Read the entire newspaper online at thesampsonweekly.com. The Sampson Weekly wants to celebrate with the residents of Sampson County. Send all your news and announcements, events, and achievements to information at thesampsonweekly.com. See the Sampson Weekly for details. Help the Sampson Weekly create a buzz. Tell your friends and family. There's a new weekly newspaper in Sampson County. The Sampson Weekly. Local sports, local news, obituaries, wedding announcements, current events, and much, much more. Look for it every Wednesday. For a limited time, free yard sale listings will be in our classified section. Go to our website, click on the classified section, and fill out the form. As long as space is available, we will publish your yard sales information. Sampson County's free community newspaper. Get your copy.
I'm Gary Hall, manager of Sessoms Jewelry. We are proud to be sponsors of JW's We Should Know. At Sessoms Jewelry, we've always strived to give you the latest in technical advice and knowledge on our merchandise. Remember, we should know at Sessoms Jewelry, downtown Clinton.
Huff Orthopedics and Sports Medicine is pleased to be a part of the community. Each and every patient we have served over the past 13 years has been given the most current and professional care available anywhere. As a board-certified orthopedic surgeon and certified sports medicine surgeon, I am committed to improving the quality of life through the latest in medical science and surgical procedures when needed. Huff Orthopedics and Sports Medicine is located at 520 Beeman Street, directly across from Sampson Regional Medical Center in Clinton. We look forward to serving you. Call us today at 910-596-5633 for an appointment. I am Dr. Alex Huff, and we are pleased to sponsor We Should Know with J.W. Simmons.
What does wine, great food, and grapes have in common? Duplin Winery. Hello, I'm Jonathan Fussell, and I'd like to invite you to come experience true Southern hospitality. Duplin Winery offers free tours and free wine tastings Monday through Saturday, and top off your day with an amazing lunch in our bistro restaurant. Be prepared for experience of a lifetime. Please call us at 800-774-9634. That number again is 800-774-9634.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank all those folks for mentioning our show each and every week. Nicole is now doing The Country Store on WCLN 11 to 70 a.m. Also, I want to mention Robert Stroud, the Boogie Shoes Radio Network on Saturday afternoon. Wayne Weeks, the Gospel Hour, each and every day, Monday through Friday. Wayne, we appreciate what you do. Tommy the Fly in the afternoon. And of course, the Morning Crew with Grandpa Nolan Z and the L-Man for mentioning that show and what we have on and announcing programs coming up. We appreciate all of you for that. We're talking with Dr. Greg Veeman. Dr. Veeman, we've given you a couple of introductions and a couple of comments. Some of the things I wanted to mention is that you also have some interest, including running, CrossFit training, missionary work for orphans in the Ukraine. You have a ministry ministry called New Life Ministries, and you collect rare Bibles. I don't want us to miss that. I find that fascinating, so I want to get in to that piece. But as we went to break a while ago, we were talking about this faith piece, this part of I think, Christianity that most folks can identify with. As you went through your process of disproving, I'll say disproving the Bible, how strong and what did that word mean, and where did it fit in that process? At what point in time did you just have to back up and say, wait a minute, something's happening here, and somehow faith was involved in it, and did it?
Well, I reached a point where, after doing all the analysis, looking for the factual data that Jesus was who he said he is, that he really rose from the dead, which would prove he was God. Once I intellectually believed that, which really wasn't that hard to do when I looked at all the evidence, I thought that's all there was to it. So I will then, by faith, on my intellectual analysis of the facts, which is very solid, it's not a blind leap of faith, it's a very solid, historically foundation for that belief, then go to church and be a Christian. And that's all I thought that there was. And that would have been enough. But here's the thing, what I didn't know was coming, was that when, by faith, I called out to God to forgive me of my sins and took Jesus up on his offer of forgiveness, I had no idea, didn't see this coming, that it's not just an intellectual state, that something actually happens to the very nature of your existence when you become a Christian. It's not something you believe, it's something that you become. So when you read the book, you'll find that the next day I wake up and I'm a different person. I'm thinking differently, I'm feeling differently. These things have, biochemical bases in our body. You just don't become a different person with a different heart overnight. In fact, it was impossible to explain, and that's one of the premises of the book, and the God diagnosis. I'm trying to diagnose what happened to me. How can I be experiencing these different things? Of course, then later I find out that, when you become a Christian, that God becomes to live inside of you, that you're reconnected to God, that you were separated and now you're reconnected. It's like the little personal computer is plugged back into the mainframe, and now there can be communication. So that takes it even beyond just faith into a reality living within you. So it's not just intellectual anymore, and it's not just faith, it's experiential in a personal way. You can't prove that to someone else, but it's the kind of thing when you have it, you know it.
And I think the analogy that you've used too with the computer thing is that it's kind of like the software. The God piece is the software piece, and when you plug it into the hardware, it all works. At what point in time did you feel like all of a sudden it's working? And I know in the book, and I think it's the 7th or 8th chapter, somewhere in there, you had a couple of almost meltdowns. And I don't want to give the book away, I want folks to read it, but there was one portion there you talk about your actual meltdown, which a lot of folks would look at it and go, well, this guy was in behavioral health crisis or something. What was going on then? How did that meltdown? Did you sense that you were replugging into something? You were rebooting, as it would be with a computer? What was going on at that time?
I didn't actually know what was going on. I mean, I knew that I had a lot of problems in my life, and at that particular moment, all the bad things that I'd done in my life were kind of running before my eyes, almost like a movie. And so that's when I went to God in forgiveness, asking for forgiveness, and I wanted to change. I wanted to not only be forgiven, but let Him change me. Now, I really didn't know that He could do it. I just was talking to Him to do it, because I didn't know that much at the time. So when I wake up the next day and I'm different, that's when it all began. But I was wanting to be a different person, and in the past I could never do it. You try, you struggle, you say, well, I'm going to treat my wife or kids better, whatever is wrong with you, but it never seems to work. And so when I went to God that night and was crying and going through this, I didn't know what was happening, but I wanted something to happen. I didn't know it was possible.
Do you have a sense that your colleagues in medicine, and this is a very subjective question, so I'm not trying to pin you in a corner, but do you have a sense that a lot of those folks knew some of the things that you discovered, maybe some didn't? Or does medicine as a whole lead folks more toward a Darwinistic thinking of from poo to zoo kind of mentality?
Well, your classical training is absolutely, completely naturalistic evolution. You know, we're strictly matter, and that's it. In medical school, there's no mention of God. There's no mention of anything other than your physical body. There's no spirit. There's no soul. There's none of that. So that, you know, silence isn't neutrality. If you hear nothing but Darwinianism and evolution, and you're just strictly physical, then that's what you're going to believe. The fact that God's not mentioned makes you think that He's not there, or that those other things are just, you know, religious beliefs.
I think one of the interesting things too, as folks consider looking at this book, and before we go to break, I want to make sure we hold up a couple of publications that you have. But the interesting thing is that when we look at it, sometimes we go about trying to prove things that we already believe, and we research based on that, and it gives us a different approach because we don't disprove what we know. We only research what we want to know. You went the opposite direction. You actually took the book and tried to disprove it, which is almost unheard of because people typically want to prove what they already believe.
Yeah.
But you went the other way.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I set out to disprove the Bible and ended up proving that it was true in the end.
I think that's the unique piece of that book, is that it completely reversed on you.
I had no idea. Now, in the big picture, of course, it wasn't just me, the intellectual doctor, figuring everything out. God's in the bigger picture behind the scenes, leading me along. You know, the neat thing that really, when you get it about Christianity, is that it's God seeking man. God was orchestrating a lot of things in the details in the book to help me. In the end, I had to decide. I had to choose to take His offer, but He was at work in a lot of this, you know, putting the right people, the Bible woman who's in the book in my life, the neighbor who's taking me to church. They took me to the right type of church. You know, I wasn't a church guy, but they took me to kind of a casual, you know, maybe more modern style church. They had a coffee bar, and that made me feel accepted. If they would have taken me to a classic, you know, church with suits and ties, I probably would have felt uncomfortable and not liked it.
Even to the patient that you refer to in your book that had the skin cancer that you treated, that was somewhat of an anomaly for you. I mean, you talk about the way the guy looked, you talk about his eyes, and at that point in time, it almost, I sensed that there was some fear going on there.
I was a little afraid because I could sense that there was something bigger going on. I didn't know what it was. It was like I could feel something in the air or space around me that was drawing me towards the Bible and God and all that. I mean, I could feel it, but I couldn't put my finger on it.
Was it a sense of supernatural awareness on your part, or were you still trying to tie it to a scientific formula of some kind?
It was like there was a presence that was peaceful, loving, and yet helping me to understand what I was reading in the Bible and believe that it was true. You know, my thoughts were constantly consumed with, you know, is this true? Is this really happening? You know, did this really happen? You know, is God knowable? That kind of thing. I mean, it was consuming my life. I mean, I would go to work and all that, but in my mind, when I was living all this, that's all I was thinking about. And then the patient comes in and corners me. Hey, do you believe in Jesus? Do you want to? Or have you given your life to Him out of the blue? Which patients don't do. You know, then you're like, okay, gosh, something really is going on.
That has never happened.
Yeah, and then why was it happening right then at that point in time? You know, so I could see that there was something going on. I just didn't know what it was.
Which begs the next question, obviously, and something that you've alluded to as well, is this whole idea: are events really random? Do things really happen randomly? Or is there a sense that God puts you in a place for a reason?
He definitely puts us in a place for a reason. And the interesting thing is you can only see it usually in hindsight. You know, He had me out of the Northeast, which is, you know, and put me in the Bible Belt. And then He brings me to a place where there's a very godly woman who reads her Bible and was living the Christian life in reality, talking about a relationship with God. You know, that God's real and He's showing her this and that, which I had never seen before. It was always the church thing. And then you have, you know, your neighbors who are coming alongside of you. So, and then getting me to read the Bible in a way. I mean, if you were to say you need to read the Bible, I wouldn't read it. But I mean, it's funny. He knew that I would only read it if I got mad and tried to disprove it. So, you know, even that, He even used the bad behavior, so-called, of the Christians for the good, because their kind of shunning us is what sparked me to get angry and then want to read the Bible. But that's exactly what I needed to do, because I didn't know. I didn't know what it said.
So in essence, the randomness theory itself kind of got pushed aside by everything you were doing, in that there seemed to be a planned script that was there that you needed to follow, and it was your choice to follow it. But when you started following it, it started coming together?
Started coming together. It's almost like I like to call it supernaturally natural. God puts events together, you're in the right place at the right time, and He sets it up, and then you've got to respond, I mean, you know, from your heart, but He's put it there for you so that you have the opportunity to hear, to understand, to have people, and it was multiple people, you know, for me at the same time. You know, you've got the neighbor taking me to church, the woman at work, the guy coming into the office, the patient. All of that happened at once. That never happened to me before ever in my life. And then all of a sudden, at that point in time, there it's all occurring at one time.
We're going to take another break. Ladies and gentlemen, time really goes fast. We're talking with Dr. Greg Veeman. We're talking about some books that he's offered: The Everlasting Strength, The Abundant Life Study, The God Diagnosis. We'll be back in a moment. Call a friend. You enjoy the rest of the show.
Health Mart Pharmacy.
A real live person. It's just like Jenny told me.
Another friend of Jenny's. Great. I've met about 3 of Jenny's friends just this week.
You'll meet more of us. Jenny was telling all of us last week how great Health Mart is.
At Health Mart, all of our pharmacists take the time to get to know our patients, explain their medications, and answer any questions they may have. We really believe in better care and better service.
Can I stop in after work?
Absolutely.
Health Mart, caring for you and about you.
For all of your prescription and health care needs, shop Matthews Health Mart in the Jordan Shopping Plaza or call 592-3121.
Hello everyone, this is Jim Darden. After 25 years of teaching horticulture at Sampson Community College, I've retired to devote my full attention to Darden's Nursery and Landscaping, where we have grown local azaleas, trees, and other landscape plants for over 30 years. And our landscaping division has designed and installed hundreds of residential and commercial landscapes, irrigation, sodding, and night light systems as well. Please give me a call at 590-9689 or at home at 592-1424, and let's get started on your landscape. Our initial consultation is free. Congratulations to J.W. Simmons on an outstanding program, We Should Know.
I'm Gary Hall, manager of Sessoms Jewelry. We are proud to be sponsors of J.W.'s We Should Know. At Sessoms Jewelry, we've always strived to give you the latest in technical advice and knowledge on our merchandise. Remember, we should know at Sessoms Jewelry, downtown Clinton.
Get the ultimate wireless phone at Star Communications. We offer a large selection of phones including Samsung, LG, the iPhone, and more. Great accessories and packages all at reasonable rates. For your convenience, we have working phones at each location for you to try out all of the available options. Everything is on one bill, and we offer fast, friendly service at all of our locations. Star Communications, your local source for all things wireless.
Huff Orthopedics and Sports Medicine is pleased to be a part of the community. Each and every patient we have served over the past 13 years has been given the most current and professional care available anywhere. As a board-certified orthopedic surgeon and certified sports medicine surgeon, I am committed to improving the quality of life through the latest in medical science and surgical procedures when needed. Huff Orthopedics and Sports Medicine is located at 520 Beeman Street, directly across from Sampson Regional Medical Center in Clinton. We look forward to serving you. Call us today at 910-596-5633 for an appointment. I am Dr. Alex Huff, and we are pleased to sponsor We Should Know with J.W. Simmons.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We had a lot of stuff we're covering today. We're talking with Dr. Greg Veeman. We're talking about some publications and books that he's written. One of those is The God Diagnosis. I'm going to hold this up. The other one, I'm going to ask Greg if he will to hold it up, The Abundant Life Study. The God Diagnosis book is the first publication, I think, that you put out. We'll also put these on the screen for you as well. But you can Google any one of these titles or just Google Dr. Greg E. Veeman. That's V-I-E-H-M-A-N. And you can find that book a very interesting read. It's a I'm not going to say it's simple, but it is something that you feel when you're reading it. So I highly encourage you to look at that book. And of course his other book, which is The Abundant Life Study. I want to thank you for being with us. We're talking about a number of issues today, and there's so many things I want to get in. Maybe we need to do a series. I don't know. What do you think? We could do a series of Bible studies. But one of the things that came to mind, and this is just kind of little excerpts here that you said, that you began to realize that all of your major concepts of reality and purpose had been wrong. And you also said that the paradigm of life that the world taught me and witnessed to me in every facet of life was a deception and lie. Wow, that's a pretty strong statement. Would you agree?
Yes.
So let's talk about that for a bit. I mean, this is really, part of me wants to say this is good stuff, but for folks out there that really hadn't accepted where their journey is and the conclusion of what the tangible journey is, these are things they need to be thinking about. Tell us what you meant by that sense of deception and lie, that just about everything.
Well, if you look at the basic questions of life, who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? What happens to me when I die? Everything that I was taught was completely false. All of it. I mean, I was taught I came by random chance, that I'm here for whatever I can accomplish of myself, and when I die, that's the end, and my purpose is made up by me. Where in reality, I was created by God, and He had a plan for my life, and I was personally created, and that when I die, I don't cease to exist. I can either go to heaven and be with Him, or I can be separated from Him from my sin. So, I mean, those are the big questions that everyone wants to know. And, not only did the world teach me the wrong answers, but, it was a matter of some of the truth was hidden. As I began to look at evidence for the Bible, I talk about this in the book, that the Bible is the most historically attested ancient document of all times. It blows away anything that we have from any other piece of ancient literature. Historical Rome or historical Caesar, all that blows it away. Why wasn't I taught that? Why wasn't that overwhelming evidence, stated to me? Instead, it's the opposite. Oh, the Bible's unreliable and, you can't trust it. So it seemed like, and when I looked at evolution, there was a lot of evidence against it, that it was either suppressed or not published or left out of the science books. Questions that I had even raised to professors that, it's kind of brushed under the rug. So it didn't seem like it was, it seemed like it was a little bit more than just, happenstance. It was some intentional deception. So I was freaked out because, like I said, my whole paradigm of life, because think about it, God heard what I said and knew my heart behind what I was saying. I'm just one person. There's 6 billion people on the planet. How did He hear me, and how did He know what I was saying was sincere? That means my whole life He's been able to know me, and yet I lived in a world where He was shut out and no one's talking about Him. So it was, there's a movie called The Matrix, which some people have seen, some people haven't, where Keanu Reeves wakes up and basically takes the pill and he finds out that his entire sense of reality is a lie. It was kind of like that for me. I was completely shocked. When Jesus talks about being blind and then seeing, it was that dramatic. It was like I was blinded my whole life, and then finally I could see.
Almost an Apostle Paul experience in the sense of how you changed your life.
Yeah, Paul was completely headed in one direction, and then, within a couple of days he was a Christian and headed in another. But it was that kind of dramatic revelation. But then once you're on the other side, it makes sense. You're like, well, gosh, it's obvious that God was there. I mean, there was that sense of you in the, He's there. Like I said, from the information in the DNA, but there's that rebellious part of us before we're saved, before we're Christian, that fights it. And wants to not believe.
When you looked at this process that you went through, were there specific signs and points of encouragement that you would speak to that would say to you, look, just continue on this journey, or are there things that were pulling you away from going on this journey? Because I could easily see where in the book you talk about that, you know, there was something a bit disenfranchising for you, that you were felt that sometimes maybe you would be admonished or you would not be recognized, quote, as a professional in some way. How did that work in with the good, the evil kind of concept of what we face in the world?
Well, I was certainly not the standard church-going type guy. So I did struggle with the fact, okay, if I become a Christian, if I kind of go for it in this and believe, how am I going to fit in with that? How am I going to tell people, you know, am I going to be accepted, and that I really want to be like those people? So that was kind of a struggle. And then there's the whole, like you said, the scientific stigma, you know, that somehow I might be labeled a religious person and non-scientific. And so, but I think that as I studied and realized how sound it all was, then I was more willing to take that on and say, hey, you know what? This is true. God's real. God's knowable. And it's not a blind leap of faith. There's experiential faith. There's prophetic faith. There is a historical background behind all this thing that's rock solid. So then I was more confident in being able to talk to people and say, hey, this is what's happened to me, and it's real and true, and you can know it too. In fact, I challenge people, prove it false. Go do your own homework and see what you find.
And I think that goes to another comment you made, which was, you know, that you had lived with the old symptoms for a long time and the new ones for only 2 weeks when you wrote this. It's that, and that you knew the disappearance of the old was somehow related to the appearance of the new. Finally, something came to you that unraveled the mystery and solved the puzzle. So was it like all of a sudden the pieces were together? Boom, now I see, in literally milliseconds? Was it that profound?
There was a moment in time. See, I thought that I was sick and was trying to figure out what was wrong with me. But I'd actually been cured. I'd actually been saved and become a Christian. So here I am thinking there's something wrong with me, and the God diagnosis trying to find out what happened to me. Why am I feeling so peaceful? Why am I feeling so different? When actually I had received the cure. So the key for me was when I realized that when I cried out to God that night, that He did something to me, to the nature of my existence, that the Holy Spirit came into me, and that was the reason I was feeling the way I was feeling, because it talks about it in the scriptures. Romans chapter 6, Galatians chapter 5, it directly described what had happened to me. The old man is dead. You now have the love of God in you and changing you. I felt that, and I knew when I read it, that's what happened to me. That was the revelation.
Do you think, and we're quickly coming to close, so I want to try to get this in. Do you think that a lot of folks maybe listening to this show today have gone to where you were part of the way, and that for some reason they have a fear of becoming totally involved with God? That fear is that I don't want to walk away from my natural self. I don't want to give up these kinds of distasteful human things, because if I get too close, I can't have that anymore. Do you sense that? Is that what I'm seeing kind of happening here?
It's rampant. I mean, a lot of people have left their Christianity at intellectualism. They've never called on God to personally save them. They have never repented of their sins, asked Him to change them from their heart, either because they don't know they're supposed to, their churches aren't teaching them that, which is very prevalent, believe it or not, or because there's something that they want to hold on to that they don't want to give up, and they think that if they give it to God, that somehow they're going to lose that. And that's another deception and lie, because there's nothing that I feared that I would give up, nothing that I thought that I would so-called lose by becoming a Christian, that once I did it, I'm like, I don't need that, I don't want that anyway. And so that's another deception and lie, because anything that God asks you to change is stuff that needs to change, and once you're going through it, you realize, hey, He was right.
I know you do speaking engagements and done quite a bit. You've been to, as we've talked earlier, this county a couple of times. Is there a number of folks, when they hear this, can they call and engage you in a conversation about doing a presentation for them? Are you still doing that kind of thing?
Yes, we have a ministry called Everlasting Strength. And if they go to www.everlastingstrength.org, all the information's on there. There's a form you can fill out for me to speak. You can email me and follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and all that kind of stuff.
And we'll add that at the bottom of the screen. I want to give you about a 30, 45 seconds wrap up in case there's something we missed. We're coming to closure. I want to give you time to touch on anything you want to touch on.
My main message to people is that God is knowable and He's personal, and that I'm amazed 10 years after becoming a Christian how interested he is in the details of my life. And my main message to people is that, make sure you're experiencing that. Make sure that you are growing in the Lord, or that you know Him to begin with, because a lot of people are deceived about their Christianity. God's personal, He's knowable. If you seek Him with your heart, He will reveal Himself to you, take you way beyond just simple faith into an interactive relationship where you know God and you see Him work in your life.
And that's critically important for folks to understand, especially coming from a guy that is a scientist from the beginning and now has become fervently enriched in the favor of
That's right.
Jesus Christ.
It's got to be real, and it is.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank you for being with us. We're kind of coming to a closure. And what I usually do on the show, many times I'll get so involved in who I'm talking to that I'll get cut off at the end. So I'm trying not to get cut off because I want to make sure we close out today. But this is a journey, and as you mentioned, you do go out and do presentations. You've been to the county a couple of times. I know this, but first time I met you was here. But we want to kind of involve you and welcome you back anytime to Sampson County. And again, thank you for being here, and also thank you for bringing Ruth with you today too, although we couldn't get her on camera. Maybe next time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Dr. Greg Veeman. We've been talking about spirituality from both the scientific perspective. We've been talking about his journey. We thank you for being with us today. And we look forward to seeing you again next week on the radio. And we always say when we end our shows, may God bless you.